Great.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what's going on.
I sent a private chat.
Welcome to the unknown webcast. I do not know what's going on. We're having glitches to this today. Kind of irritating.
I
You
I
can't. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but your mouth is not moving.
My mouth is not moving. I hate it when my mouth doesn't move or
Oh,
it has
now it's
sound
moving
coming
again.
out.
That's a good
Oh,
trick when you can pull it off.
okay. Well, let's do this and see if it works. No. Oh, there we go. Okay. Welcome to the unknown webcast, glitches and all. This is just a bit of a trigger warning. Uh, for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones, I really am so conservative. I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. This week, a new face. Well, not new to her, perhaps, but to us. Shanda Fulbright joins us to talk about something that is a long-time theme in my life. Everyone is being discipled, but by who? My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida. Am I switching over? Do I exist even here? Okay.
Yes,
Greetings.
you
We're having gremlins here today. Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came outside shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time is gone. World's End Theology Outlet. And our regular legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Shanda Fulbright, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials and credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Our regular announcements notice: the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on somebody else, or even if you like it, to ensure your continued access to this program, please go to MidwestOutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now we introduce our special guest, Shanda Fulbright.
Hi guys. Yay.
Our fake studio audience is applauding you with fake applause.
I love it.
We were hoping you would. But you know what, Don? When you were doing all that initial stuff, all that, I thought I could just send you a private chat. Apparently, maybe I can't do that.
Well, you should be able to. There's something going on with my computer, obviously, so I'll have to get to the bottom of that.
Okay.
My cat managed to
Your cat.
Kind of a funny story. A few days ago, yes, I was doing something. This is back when we were in a deep freeze, and my cat wants me to open the window next to my desk every morning so he can lay out there and watch people go by. It doesn't matter how cold it is. And I was trying to wrestle it open, and so he jumped up on the desk to help me and knocked my coffee over into my computer.
Oh,
so it's been acting kind of odd ever since then.
Oh, okay.
The cat too, and my computer. Yeah.
Well, after you whack the cat.
No, I didn't whack the cat. No, I wouldn't. It's Tucker. I would never whack Tucker.
He's not even a year old yet, is he?
He is. Yeah, he's a year, almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in August. Yeah.
Oh, I guess I'm out of touch.
Dominates the house. He dominates our house.
Yeah, that's what they do. They take over. Well, greetings, Shanda. You don't need to know all this. You're probably not even a cat person, are you?
I don't have any cats, but I like hearing the stories about cats, so I'm good. But if my
You're not a
cat
cat lady.
knocked coffee into my computer, I'd probably whack it like a
Well, Tucker, it's kind of interesting. He just was a little teeny white cat we saw in a rescue place and decided to adopt him. Turns out he's a flame point Siamese. We didn't even know such a thing exists. And he is very social. And he is CDO, which is what I am. CDO is like OCD, but the letters are in order like they should be.
It's OCD with dyslexia is what it is.
Yeah. So we do everything exactly the same way every morning at a specific time. And if I am 2 minutes late, he comes in and complains. So
Oh, well, that can be helpful.
it
So,
can be.
but
So
wait, did you run that title of our program through the grammar checker? Because I keep wanting to say by whom instead of by who.
everyone is being discipled, but by whom is fine. I did by who, but whatever.
Okay,
But it's not Doctor Who. So that's
all right.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it could be. Some people might be discipled by Doctor Who. Isn't that correct, Shanda? Why is this important to you? First, how did you come to the faith? How did you get involved in apologetics? And why is this topic important to you? I can tell you why it's important to me. Why is it important to you?
Well, I came to the faith mostly when I was 17. I was raised in church, and I think when you're raised in church and God is the talk of your home and you do things like say the blessing, before dinner and go to church all the time. My mom was very diligent to take us to church. Every time the church doors were open, we were in church. And I think I prayed the most about God, please don't let her want to go to church today. Like, can we have a Sunday off? Can we not go every time the doors are open? But, so my mom did a good job of laying the foundation. And when I was 17, I was walking, through my high school campus, just randomly praying about something. And I don't even remember what I was praying about at the time, but I remember ending my prayer with, I love you, God. Amen. And as soon as, I've prayed that way before this day, but this particular time, everything kind of like just stopped. And the words, I love you, God, I realized were not true. Like I thought, wait, do you really love God? Or are you just saying that because like that's the thing to say when you're raised in church? So that was the moment I realized, wait, I don't have my own relationship with God, and I don't love this God because I don't know him. So my next prayer was, God, I don't know you, and it scares me because I know what that means. I don't have my own relationship with you. So help me to get to that place where I know you for myself. And I'm really glad that it happened that way, because if I was at church or if I was at home, I probably would have ran to someone and tried to figure it out with them. But I feel like God got me alone, even though it was probably pretty unconventional to be in high school, walking from one class to the next. And so it was the moment that my heart's desire became to know God for myself. And so I started my own journey with the Lord and began to read my Bible on my own. And really, my prayer for several years after that, especially when I was around 19, was, God, I just want to know you. I just want to know you. And so the Lord nurtured that in me. And when 2020 hit, which this is going to be kind of weird for people, like, wow, you never knew apologetics. Never did my church ever mention the word apologetics. So I wasn't sure about, the reasons for my faith, like whatever the Bible said, which is, it's great. You need the foundation of the Bible. I'm not saying that you don't. But my everything, my answers to everyone who asks would just be like, because the Bible says it, but one day my husband and I in 2020, we were going to the beach in California for our anniversary weekend. And we heard about the band that sings More Than the Drops in the Ocean. The band name is escaping my memory at the moment. But the lead singer was like, I'm leaving the faith. I've been singing for the last couple of years, but I don't know why a good God would send people to hell. And I don't know why, he doesn't save everyone. He had these questions that were not answered. He was a pastor's kid. And me and my husband kind of like, that's lame. This guy was raised in church and doesn't know why hell is real and why God would send people to hell. And actually, God doesn't send people to hell. Anyways, we kind of unraveled that and thought how dumb it was that he would even think this. And then we started to test ourselves and say, how would we have answered this guy? Like if he was in my church and he came to me with these same questions, how would I have answered him? And I realized I don't think I would have given him a satisfactory answer and kept him from leaving the church. So that year also, COVID was going crazy and I started listening to Vodi Bakum. My husband started listening to Frank Turek, and our church closed down in California, as did many churches around the United States. But California was the worst state that I know of that kept every door locked, closed, churches closed. Pastors were like, we got to stay out of the church for a while. Our church was closed down for months and months. Kids didn't go back to school for over a year. And I was like, why aren't we more bold in our faith? Why are we not hearing these things that Dr. Frank Turek is talking about, and Vodi Bakum about being bold? And John MacArthur was like the only one fighting the state to keep the doors open. And we realized we don't know the reasons for our faith. And so I don't think my faith was shaken in 2020. I think I realized my faith wasn't as strong. The explanation for my faith wasn't as strong as it should have been. I needed apologetics to come in and fill in that missing piece to the puzzle to help me be able to have these conversations, because everyone was asking questions, including my own kids. So we sat down at the table as a family and we're like, we're going to learn how to give good answers. If somebody was in our church and wanted to walk away from the faith, we wanted to be able to at least give them something to think about as they walked away, to not make it so easy. And we jumped into apologetics with both feet. I ended up leaving the public school system. And I thought, you know what? The church needs this. People are like me sitting in pews, and some of them don't even have the biblical foundation that is needed. And then if they don't have that, they're not getting apologetics, because a lot of times, like I said, in the church, I wasn't getting it, never even heard the word. And that seems to be the consensus when I talk about it. And as a teacher, I realize learning is my jam. Like I love to teach, and I love to be a student as well. You're both, right? You're always both. But I realized the church, we're not discipling. We're not using tools like apologetics to disciple, and we're not laying the solid biblical foundation needed in order to layer apologetics on that. So I took my educational training and knowledge, and I'm trying to transfer it over into like the discipleship aspect, because it's very much needed.
Are you using Bloom's taxonomy as you do this? You've heard of that, right?
I have heard of that, but I'm not necessarily familiar with it.
Yeah, they used to drill. Well, I went to teacher training back in 2002. I taught in Christian middle school for some years. I can't remember how many. But what did you teach? You taught in the public schools. What grade level and subjects?
My last assignment was 5th grade, so multiple subjects.
Yeah.
Okay. Before that, I taught middle schoolers, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I got the lowest readers in the school. Some of them were still on a 1st grade level, and they were at the 8th grade.
And you're doing English?
Yes, English. Okay. Just teaching them how to read, going back to phonics, because many of them didn't have phonics. A lot of them were English language learners too, so that just made it more difficult for them.
In California, yeah.
In California, yeah. So I loved it though. It was a challenge for me, but.
Was that group that you went to see Hawk Nelson?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And I don't know which member. I mean, that's the name of the group. Is there a member named that, or is that just a name that they picked out?
It was their lead singer. And I've said his name before, but
the one who quit.
Yeah, he deconstructed his faith.
Deconstructed.
I can find his name here too, because people will like.
He wasn't the only one, was he? Among
we've had a number of celebrity Christians deconstructing their faith,
and it seems like there's a certain percentage of them came from the contemporary Christian music industry.
Well, some, but we had like Josh Harris. I
Yeah.
kissed dating goodbye, and then he kissed Christianity goodbye. So,
Right.
uh,
Yeah. And what all these people, these deconstructors, have in common, I think, well, either they were influencers when they started deconstructing, or they became influencers by deconstructing.
Right.
And another thing they all have in common is they've kind of reduced Jesus to an influencer, or a moral influencer,
right.
which of course goes back, I don't know, 1,000 years in church history, the moral influence theory of the
Right.
atonement.
Right. But one of the points I think that Shanda has been making, which is an important one, and one that as
Right.
you know, Ron, I keep going back to this one, is they had not been given a clear understanding of the essential doctrines of the faith. And so when asked, they didn't have any sort of ammunition to deal with the questions. So it was easier just to get out of town than to
Right.
try to fight the fight. We wrote on Josh Harris. Josh Harris is more in sort of Gothardism than anything else. It's kind of the era. His dad was very much like Bill Gothard. And so we dealt with that. But if that's what you know of the faith, that's not really the faith.
So
Mhm.
were you, I mean, maybe you said this and I just kind of missed it, but it sounds like you were early in your Christian life, you were trying to make sure you were a Christian
Mhm.
in a way, but you were also, did you get into much apologetics at that early stage? I mean,
No.
no.
I never got into apologetics. By the way, his name is John Steingard, the lead singer for Hawk Nelson, the one who left. But I never heard the word apologetics. And I remember there were a couple times in college where my faith was tested. And a lot of times it came with like, well, how do you know what you believe is true? Because everybody believes it. Well, that would have been nice to know, like objective truth and different things like that. It would have been nice to know those apologetics concepts, what's taught in apologetics, to be able to give an answer to that. But instead I was like, that's true. How do I know? And so it kind of made me think for a moment, but I brushed it off because I laid a biblical foundation. I read my Bible. I studied my Bible. I also got involved in youth ministry, children's ministry. I mean, I was very involved in the church. So I taught lessons to kids, and I took that very seriously, that I needed to learn how to rightly divide the word of truth in order to pass that on to somebody else, because I know that, I knew what James said about being a teacher, you're going to be held to a higher standard. So I took all of those. I believe the word of God, that he spoke it, that it's true, that it's inerrant and infallible. And I live that way. So for me, I laid a solid biblical foundation. I just didn't have all of the, why is the Bible a reliable historical document? Well,
Right.
I don't know. I just
Right.
know, like, I didn't need, I would say if you have a need for the evidence, I didn't need that.
Yeah.
God exists. Okay. The Bible, the word of God. Okay. But that also means that if I would have been born into a Muslim household or a Buddhist household, I would have just, okay, you tell me that this is so thank God that I was born into a Christian household, but there are a lot of people out there who aren't, one. And then there are people out there who do need the quote unquote evidence that points to God's existence. So even though I didn't need it, I still needed to give a good reason for the hope that was within me. And I did not have that. And so it really became evident to me when I mocked John Steingard's reasons for leaving the faith. But then I realized I could not articulate a good reason he should have stayed in the faith if that opportunity would have been presented to me, because I still had a responsibility to give a good answer to somebody who's struggling to believe in God. So, and also I would have to say, if you're just believing because I don't need the evidence, you told me that God exists, so okay, that's not a good reason to believe. Because when you look at James Sire's 4 categories of reasons to believe: social, psychological, religious, and then you have the evidentiary ones, right? Mine was in the social category. My mom told me God existed. She took me to church every time the doors were open. And because mom said it, it must be true. However, God is good, and he does confront us and say, he gives you the "who do you say that I am" moment. And that was basically the moment I was, 17, walking through my high school campus. So it was gracious of the Lord to continue to deal with me. But my strong, I would say my stronger, the strength of my faith came from really valuing the word of God and making sure that I was in it and read it and
Could your
studied.
mom be watching this by any chance?
I'll tell her.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
okay, good.
apologetics is important to us, and it's important to you. Just so I have like three things to say to get to what we're really going to talk about. One is a complaint I often get is you're divisive. Apologetics is divisive. Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. As the late Dr. Norm Geisler would say, with the day he got married, he promised to divide from all of the women, and no one thought that was a bad thing. Sometimes division is necessary.
Like in the
right?
Gospel of John, it says there was a division among them because of the words Jesus said. So
Right.
Jesus was a divisive person, wasn't he?
Absolutely was. So that's one. Two, there's a common misconception that apologetics is for evangelism. Now, that is true. It is for evangelism, but it isn't only for evangelism. It is the way that we can make a case to unbelievers for the faith in areas where they have questions. It is also for discipleship. The reason is, as a young believer, someone who's newly into the faith, they also need to have reasons and be equipped to understand the faith and explain it to others. Now, having said that, you did an interesting article on something that is really, really important to me that my pastor and I talk about a lot. And when I speak in churches, I often bring this up, and that is discipleship. There's this impression somehow that discipleship is just a sort of a Christian thing. But in reality, everybody is discipling and everyone is being discipled. The question is, who or whom is the one discipling you? Now, you're arguing that culture is discipling Christians currently. Where do you say that?
I say that because, for one, we all have a worldview, and I've been saying lately on my podcast, especially, that worldview formation is just a fancy way to say discipleship. And there's a misconception among everyone, I would say, in and outside of the church, that discipleship is isolated to Christianity. Oh, discipleship, you're a disciple. I'm not a disciple because I'm not a religious person. So you're a disciple because you go to church or you're involved in this religion. But they don't understand that discipleship and worldview formation is just basically the same thing, said differently. And George Barna says that 65% of Americans claim to be Christians, while only 6% of those who claim to be Christians have a biblical worldview. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that what Christians say they believe is not in line with how they live their lives, because a worldview is to live in accordance with what you believe, basically, in a simpler way to say it. So even though you may not be a religious person, you still have a worldview, and your worldview is being formed by those things that you allow into your mind to influence you. And that means you are a disciple of someone or something.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Don and Shanda, who might people in our pews actually be disciples of if we were to really, look under the hood, so to speak, in their minds? What might we find? If you're really into, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a great question. And I'm actually teaching a class right now and this week we're talking about worldview formation. So I have everyone in the class go and take inventory. How often you're listening to podcasts, watching certain entertainment, listening to political things, reading whatever you read, whatever you watch, whatever you listen to, people think the innocence of a song, oh, it's just a song, I'm only listening to the beat, but those songs have words, and those words shape the way that you think.
Yeah.
That you think shapes the way that you live. So you'd have to take inventory of those things that you expose yourself to, because one of the things that discipleship is, and this was in the article, I kind of flipped the script on discipleship in a way in that article that I wrote for Cross Examined on what Babylon teaches us about discipleship. Because discipleship it's supposed to be taught, Taught, not caught, Caght. Unfortunately, in the church, it's more caught than taught.
Yeah.
So there's a way to disciple that, no matter if you're getting discipled through New Age, Judaism, Islam, you name the religion, atheism, no matter which program you're under or which influencer you're under, that discipleship program is going to look the same in order for it to effectively form your worldview. And that means it has to be three things. It has to be intentional, immersive, and not neutral. Well, just think about how often the church doors are open. If somebody only goes to church on a Sunday morning and they're there for maybe an hour and a half, you're getting 1.5 hours of hopefully intentional instruction that's biblically based. But again, Barna's statistics is very startling. There's only 37% of lead pastors in the United States that have a biblical worldview. So maybe 1/3 of the churches are actually, solid instructional.
Right. Yeah.
To evaluate that, right? So yeah, you can't say because I go to church or because I am a Christian that I am a disciple. Even if you're attending a solid biblically based church service on a Sunday, you are not immersed into that intentional instruction. Because one of the things I've learned as a teacher, and here's the thing about the public school system. I have one of my boys is still in school, and I won't do the public school system anymore because I'm not going to, I don't like the system. The system's set up where the children are not going to succeed likely because it's a system that's not great. However, in California, we had our administrators breathing down our necks all the time for testing, and making sure all the kids get the instruction that they need. And since I was in a self-contained classroom with fifth graders that had to teach all subjects, I mean, we were hopping, but I had to continually assess my kids, and my instruction was targeted. It was very focused. Like, by this month, we're going to have this instruction taught. And then the next month, we're going to have this instruction until we get to the end of the fifth grade and have taught all the concepts. And the goal is that all kids will be at grade level, ready to move on.
Right.
It's more targeted than the church's instruction. We're constantly assessing our kids and saying, wait, are they ready for the next concept? Are they ready for the next concept? If not, they have a gap in their learning. They have a gap in what they should know. And I can't go forward because I have to back up and fill in the gaps.
And we know that kind of assessment should be happening in the church.
Yeah.
Because the book of Hebrews says, by now you should be here. You should be beyond milk. You should be into meat.
Yes.
And so they were doing, I mean, obviously it's not going to be quite as structured. It's not going to be as in targeted in such detail.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody has to be at the same grade level in the Christian life, but you should be able to look at a Christian and say, like, when I was doing counseling, they walked in the door. They'd been on missions trips. They'd been to one of them had been a deacon, and they told me all this experience, and now they're living together outside of marriage, and they want counseling for a wedding that they're going to have. I said, no. You should be beyond that. That's the milk, okay? That's the basics, and you don't get that,
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's also doctrine too.
Barna did the testing for us. This is it. The church doesn't have to go and be like, all right, members, I'm going to test you.
Could you show that title again?
Yeah, this is it right here. And this
American
is the American
Worldview Inventory.
Yeah, the latest ones are about parenting, like, parents, the worldview of parents now with children under the age of 13. He goes into the depths of that. But this one is the one for, like, basically the worldview inventory of who believes in Marxism in America? How many of them
Right.
believe in New Age, et cetera, et cetera. But this is how the church can assess just basically if 6% of those who claim to be Christians out of the 65%, or 6% have the biblical worldview out of 65% who claim it, just go in with that in your head as a pastor and say, okay, we have a lot of Christians here who don't have a firm grasp of the essential doctrines
faith.
of
Right.
faith. Yeah,
Right.
they just don't even really know what Christianity is. So I believe many who call themselves Christians and don't have a biblical worldview think that they are because they don't understand what Christianity is. So I wouldn't even say introduce apologetics yet. They need the what. What is
Yeah, right.
Christianity? And then they need the why
Well,
layered on top of that.
I like your distinction. Of course, this goes back to there is a saying, some things are more easily caught than taught. That was D. James Kennedy used that a lot in his Evangelism Explosion program. But what he was getting at was the idea of making a presentation in front of somebody. It's if you can see how it's being done. You read about it on paper. That doesn't really prepare you to sit in somebody's living room and present the gospel. So if you're catching it, you're paying attention,
right?
And you're observing for the purpose of learning. And I think in a way, in our church services, if they're done right, the part of our worship service where things are caught is, well, to name one, it's the singing. What are we singing? I mean, we're putting words in your mouth. You may have just walked into this church for the first time. We're putting hymns in front of you. We're asking you to sing them. This is where you're catching what we believe. Well, what do we believe? Well, some of this stuff that's being sung is pretty thin.
Right.
Thin or heretical, even.
It doesn't tell you much. What are you catching? You're catching, it's just happy clappy, whatever. In this public schools, what are kids catching when they enforce pronoun hospitality? What are they catching? You're not telling a third grader the whole doctrine behind it. You're just saying if somebody wants to be called a she when they look like a he, you call them a she. Well, that now the kids are catching something.
Right.
That eventually they will have a framework for when it's taught.
Yeah. There's I believe it's in one of the worldview curriculums I'm actually reading right now by Dr. Jeff Myers. And he says, beliefs are like colds. You catch them when you're around people. And so a lot of times when you ask people, well, why do you believe that? I don't know. I just believe it. No, you have a source for your belief, and every belief needs to be unraveled back to that source. And then you need to evaluate the source and say, is this source trustworthy? And that's where, even with Christianity, the Bible is the source, but with progressive Christianity and, moralistic therapeutic deism, which is another more recent worldview, Christians don't even really understand the source that they're supposed to be drawing their beliefs from.
Right.
So we have a lot of work to do in the church, and it's going to be laying the foundation.
Yeah.
The essentials are essential for a reason. The basics are the foundation because you can't skip over them and build without them.
Sometimes though you just want really something nice and soft for you.
I mean,
and one of our sponsors addresses that exact
you just
question.
want to break from all this intense discipleship stuff. Our friends at World's End Theology Outlet have some questions. Are you still trying to figure out how to clean up in the ministry business? Do you want to finally learn how to get to the bottom of growing a successful church? Would you like to flush away your failures and start having your best church now? Well, then you need Charlatan Ultra Soft, because nothing says theologically soft like Joel Osteen's Charlatan Ultra Soft. And even in these days of COVID, there's never any shortage. It's been personally tested by the man himself. It provides comfort where it counts. It wipes away even the most stubborn orthodoxy, and it comes with a money-back guarantee. Keep those butts in the pews with Joel Osteen's Charlatan Ultra Soft, available only at World's End Theology Outlet. So, you want to avail yourself of that?
There
something
you have it.
soft and fuzzy, and
Soft and
hopefully not
fuzzy,
too
yeah.
fuzzy. But so
And Joel is discipling his people into that mentality. That's the point. He is teaching them that, and they are observing and practicing it as well. So it is caught and taught at the same time. Uh, by the way, Patrick Hag asked a question. What is the name of Shanda's podcast? How do
It's
they
her.
find you?
It's Her Faith Inspires podcast.
All
Her
right.
Faith Inspires.
And there should be a link in the description for those who want to go there. So, Roman Centurion loves the sponsor, by the way, Ron.
oh, yeah, those centurions, they really need a lot of
Yeah,
comfort.
soft.
Yeah,
They need
anything,
soft comfort where comfort counts. Yeah,
little
exactly.
contrast with their regular everyday lives. So, so yeah, I mean, my personal and Don's, I think, personal journey toward apologetics came earlier. Mine came really early in my Christian life because I became a Christian back in the 70s, right? And right at that time, there was this enormous push going on in my neighborhood by Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. They're coming through on a regular basis. And I really wasn't aware. I mean, I just became a Christian a few months ago, and now I've got these people at my door who are telling me that Jesus isn't God. Um, I'm thinking, oh, you carry a Bible, you love Jesus, oh, great, and then they start saying these things back to me that are really strange. And some of these are kids I was going to high school with. So I would see them in the hallways after I would encounter them at my doorstep. And they appeared to know their Bibles better than I did.
Yeah.
And that
Well,
really shocked
right,
me.
and Joy and I got involved with it largely because she wanted to reach Jehovah's Witnesses. And so we started learning about, oddly enough, by learning about them, we really learned our faith. Why do we believe Jesus is God? Why do we believe in the Trinity? Those things were established as we were studying these other groups. So that was interesting. And our pastor, we would talk to him about the New Age, which we were concerned about growing in culture. And he was convinced there was no such thing as a New Age, but there was. And now it is in the church in some dramatic ways because people were discipled into it.
And that's frustrating because sometimes pastors, I mean, they are busy people. They don't have a lot of time to look everywhere. And sometimes, you find out that there's a threat coming into the church that they, it's totally flying under their radar. Now, your pastor eventually caught on that, or did he? Or is this a pastor who never
well,
went down?
eventually, but it was several years. So
yeah, I've had that experience too, where my pastor, he just wasn't convinced until one day he realized, one way or another, that this really is a problem.
Well, our home church now, in fact, we've been going there quite a while, 12 years maybe. And before I started going there, I went out and met him for lunch, and I said, "Now, here's what we do. Here's our ministry. Are you comfortable in having me in your church? Because we listen differently to sermons. I have," and I told him, unfortunately, I have a red pencil personality. When something is said wrong, I go, check, wrong. And he said, "I definitely want you there." And he has been wonderful. He loves what we do, and our church supports us. So, but it's rare.
And
What
when
is your?
I'm just going to say, when you're in those times when your own pastor isn't even excited about what you're doing, it just feels really lonely. I don't know, Shanda, if you have that experience, if you've been in a church where you're defending the faith and your pastor thinks that's a divisive thing to do or whatever, but maybe not.
I haven't, because the church that I was in California when we got into apologetics it closed down, and we never went back to that church because
really?
we made a lot of life changes. That year, one of them was moving out of the state. Well, we planned to move out of the state. We moved out in 2021. And my whole family did, like parents, in-laws,
Whoa.
siblings. Yeah, we all packed it up and left. And we one of the even the people that I work with at cross-exam will be like, wow, you learned apologetics really fast. Like, how'd you learn it in just a few years time? Because it's 2024. I started in 2020. And I said, because I had a strong biblical foundation. But I have heard a lot of people say, I don't want, apologetics. It's too divisive, or we don't need apologetics. We don't need to know why. We just have to have faith. And immediately when I hear that, and that's from some people that I went to church with back in California that I've known for years, that used to teach at the church and pour into my life and my family's. And as soon as I hear that now, I'm just like, you don't understand what apologetics is. And I would dare to say, you don't really understand what faith is either, if you're going to say you just have to have faith. So not so much a pastor, but other people I go to church with, yes, they have that mentality.
Gotta have faith. That's like a George Michael song, isn't it? I mean,
or my favorite one, God doesn't need to be defended, those things, which I'm not saying God needs to be defended, but I would say in this cultural climate, your belief in him needs to be defended. So,
well, I mean, it's like, I think what you've touched upon really is a classic reason for why we need to have the kind of defense that goes to evidences, that goes to, the details that respond to the kind of things you were hearing from this guy who deconstructed, is that when these are presented to us, as they were probably presented to that guy, that singer who left the faith, they're presented in such a way as to say, you Christians are just crazy to believe this stuff.
mm-hmm.
You're mad. You're buffoons. You're idiots. And what evidences does is it shows us we're not. We have reasonable, rational reasons for believing what we believe. And I think when we are dealing with somebody who is attacking us that way, I think it often is very effective to say, well, you say that I, am irrational for these beliefs, but here's what I found. And please tell me why this is irrational. Please tell me why it's irrational to believe that our text is very secure when it's backed up by nearly 6,000 New Testament manuscripts and about 20,000 Old Testament manuscripts that go back even further. Tell me why. Why is that irrational? And things
let's go back to your thesis of your article. What has Babylon taught us about discipleship? Interesting concept, interesting title. And I agree, most have their worldview shaped by osmosis. It filters into their brains through the books they read, the films they watch, the people they hang around with. So what is Babylon teaching us about discipleship that we need to take notice of in the church?
In Daniel chapter 1, we see this, this discipleship program that the young Hebrew boys were forced into. And first we see that Babylon was intentional. They were intentional about when they chose, these young men, what age these young men were, and who they were. They were of noble character, of nobility. They were of royal descent. They were young. And I think that says a lot right there about worldview formation. Barna does confirm it by saying it starts young. And what Barna also confirms is that by the time a child is 13, their worldview is formed. And when they're in their teens and 20s, their worldview is tested. And that's when they start to say, okay, is what I was raised to believe really true? Well, Babylon understood that teaching and immersing these kids into a program when they're young is going to be the best way to form their minds and to shape their minds and to get them to really they're pliable so they can form them into who they wanted them to be so they could serve the king. So we see that intentionality. And next we see that Babylon was immersive. This was over a 3-year program where these boys had to learn the language and the literature of the Chaldeans. And they were put into, under the watch of these guards who was going to immerse them into this, indoctrinate them. And they not only had to learn the ways of the Babylonians, they had to become like them. They they dressed like them. They had to eat the food. And that's where Daniel's dilemma comes into play, right? And where he really starts to say, okay, what I find really interesting too about Daniel is that he didn't push back on what he had to learn. He pushed back on what he had to do, what he had to, to participate in. And so that right there is telling, because a lot of times we're afraid as Christians to expose our kids to these other ideas like, oh my gosh.
Right.
And there's a time for that. I'm not saying do it at 5, but also we have to understand that if they know the truth, if we're discipling them in the truth, if we're giving them the Bible and apologetics, we don't have to be afraid to expose them to other ideas, because when they're in an immersive discipleship program already, the other discipleship program or the other influences that try to disciple them are not going to be as effective. So we see through Babylon that it was intentional, it was immersive. And also Babylon they weren't neutral. They did not allow for any room of compromise at all with what these boys used to be, what they came from. Go ahead and on your spare time, give allegiance to the God of, Israel. No, they didn't allow that. It was total and complete allegiance to Babylon, so much so where they changed their names. That's how we know Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego by their Babylonian names. We know Daniel that was his given name by his parents, but he became Belteshazzar, and that just goes to show how their program was not neutral. And I also gave a side by side of Christian discipleship looks the same way. Jesus modeled that for us better than anybody else, but it's still, Jesus was intentional. He was immersive, and he was not neutral in his discipleship program of just look at the 12 disciples. So Babylon did discipleship. They did it well. It was effective. We only hear of 4 of the young men who were taken from Judah that did not bow the knee. They did not compromise. They stood their ground, and God blessed them and put them into other areas of leadership. There could have been more, I don't know, but they didn't make it into the book. And so that lets me know that there likely weren't many if there were more. Why did Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego all decide to hold their ground? Well, they must have been a part of a discipleship program before they left Judah. And I would say, just putting this together, Deuteronomy 6 God tells the parents what to do and how to do that. When you walk along the way, when you sit and when you rise, and you come and you go and you do all these things, you tell your children about the things that you've seen and heard over the years. You're going to instruct them, but it's only going to happen when these things are bound on your own heart, when they're written on the tablets of your own heart. And because why is that? Because what flows from the heart of the teacher is going to go to the minds of the student. And that's how you disciple. You can only teach what you know, and you can only pass on what you possess. And that is why Babylon discipled, and they did it well. And that's why God tells us to disciple and to do it well. And that's why being intentional, immersive, and not neutral is the way of discipleship. You can't get mad about it. You can't get mad at Babylon. That's just the way of discipleship. They just knew how to do it. And so everyone's going to be a part of a program that's intentional, immersive, and not neutral, even if you're passive in it. People will be like, no, that's not me. I'm not being discipled because I'm not sitting under anyone in particular. I'm not being, instructed by anyone or mentored. Okay, well, if you're looking at your phone on a daily basis, I mean, it's really easy to see what you are looking at and exposing yourself to. Tell me what you watch and I'll tell you who your teachers are. Tell me what you listen to and I'll tell you who your teachers are, because they are being very intentional about what they're composing and scripting and speaking into a microphone or on entertainment. I mean, just look at Netflix and Amazon, who are now taking these children's programs and putting sex education, transgender, you name it. I think in Amazon's newest one, the devil is really the hero in the story of Genesis chapter 3. It's not God. And so why is that? Because they're very intentional about what they're doing. And when your kid's sitting in front of that for hours a day, they're also being immersed into that program. So what's the outcome going to be? They're going to be little disciples of the culture.
They are. We're going to be doing a program in a few weeks about a book written by Chris Martin titled "The Wolf in Their Pockets." It's a very important book, and one of the points that he makes in here is we're seeing something happening globally that we've never really seen happen before. And it comes to this question of discipleship that you're just mentioning here. It was the case that wherever you grew up, you tended to hold the worldview of the community in which you lived, your family, the school, you had kind of your own language almost. And yeah, you might disagree, you might venture out, but generally speaking, everyone held a similar worldview. That is changing dramatically now at a certain age category. I'd have to look it up, but I think it's around 30 years old. So that people who are over 35, let's say, or 40, they still kind of have their cultural worldview from their area. But under that age group, it doesn't matter if you're in Bolivia, Italy, South Africa, or Illinois, they all have the same worldview because they're being taught it through social media.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how similar you're finding that age group act in. Well, we just saw it with the whole thing over Israel. You have protests happening where over that. Every country virtually was involved with kids who were under 30 years old.
Yep. Yeah. Amazing. And a lot, yeah, that's the thing, that we have to understand how discipleship works. So we know how to evaluate those things in our lives that are taking over the mind. Everything starts in the mind. I was telling someone the other day, even rejection of God starts in the mind, because when you reject him here, then you really, in essence, hardening your heart, because you're saying, I'm not going to allow that into my heart, because belief takes place in the heart, according to Romans 10:9. So whatever's filtered through the mind enters into the heart. And that is how you begin to act out and speak the things that you really believe. And it reveals your worldview. And so the church has to get on board with what discipleship really is, and then how to effectively disciple the congregation. And I don't care if the number of 65% who claim to be Christians, I don't care if that number goes up. Who cares if it's 90% who claim to be Christians? What we really need is that 6% of those who actually have a biblical worldview. We need that percentage to rise, because if the 65% went down, but that 6% went up to 20%, 25%, well, great. Then that means the church is actually doing its job.
Right. That's right. Now I argue, our church has like an adult ed class on Sunday mornings. Right now we're going through Dr. Donald Williams' book, 95 Theses for a New Reformation. Very good. We've had him on, talked about it. I would really recommend that book. In fact, I think every church leadership should go through that book, personally. But one of the things that came up this past Sunday, and my pastor sort of put me on the spot, and he likes to do that, is ask me, okay, you have a view about what's going on in the church that I think we need to understand, and could you verbalize that? And it works like this. The church has made a transition, started about 1825, of replacing the education of believers with evangelism. The idea is the church is supposed to figure out ways to get unbelievers into the church so you can sneak up on them with the gospel. The consequence is you may be growing numerically churches, but they're not growing spiritually, because everything is about essentially multi-level marketing for Jesus. You want to get a downline going where you're inviting more and more unbelievers in so you can sneak up on them with the gospel, but no one's ever being trained or discipled in the process. So we have moved education out of the church. We've brought evangelism into the church, and now neither one are being done extraordinarily well as a result of that. The church is an embassy. We are to be equipping and training those ambassadors in the faith at the embassy so they can in turn go out and share the gospel. That's discipleship, is it not?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and that's the way for that number to go up. And you're right, Babylon. I appreciate your article because I think you're right.
Well,
Babylon.
I'm looking at it right now. I mean, you keep going over these headings: intentional, immersive, not neutral.
Hmm.
I just got to tell everybody, you got to read this article. I mean, that really condenses the gist of what the church, is facing and what the church should be. We should be intentional. We should be immersive. Now, there is a point at which immersiveness becomes cultish. If you've ever been
Sure.
in a cult, you know what I mean. But that's not what we mean, though. In other words, we're not talking about brainwashing, mind control. What does it mean to be immersive? Well, it means for Christian discipleship, it means that this is your anchor. The scriptures are your anchor. They're keeping you balanced there. You're grounded there. You're grounded, secondly, I mean, it's hard to rank these things really, but you're grounded in your Sunday worship experience, hearing the word preached, worshiping with other Christians, fellowshipping with other Christians, praying with other Christians. And when you're not with other Christians, you're constantly thinking about, I'm living this life before God, not just before
Right.
the world. I'm living it
Right.
before God. What have I been learning? What am I, how am I mean, I first and foremost, I'm living it before God, but the world is watching. But that's not my God. They're not my primary audience. I think that's where a lot of the church has gone astray, thinking the world is our primary audience.
Hmm.
God
Right.
is our primary audience.
Right.
Yeah. And there's
And so,
also something to be said about teaching. As a teacher, I always told my students, it's my job to teach you. It's my job to make sure that you learn. And that is true. As a teacher, I have to make sure that I'm prepared, that I know the material, and that I can transfer that knowledge to my student. However, there's also responsibility on the part of the student. And everybody who sits under that pastor is a student of the word. And Jesus talks about this in Mark 4 of the parable of the sower. And one of the things I love in this parable is that Jesus mentions the word hear about 11 times. So he first starts with listen, and then he says the word hear, hear, hear. And what he says is those who heard along the path, those who heard along in the thorns, those who heard along the wayside. He's saying those who heard the word in a certain way were able to receive the word or reject the word in a certain way. And we see that how you hear the word determines how you receive it. And
Right.
so then those who heard the word, accepted it, are the ones who produced, the crops 100-fold, et cetera, et cetera. And then Jesus goes on to say, I think in verse 24, be careful how you hear then. And so it's like, we have to teach. I don't think a lot of people they don't expect a Christian to give a good answer for the hope that
Right.
is within them. They don't expect an intellectual response that says, let me tell you why I believe what I do. So they're not expecting that. And then I don't believe necessarily that many Christians go into the church thinking of themselves as a learner, as a student who needs to be careful how they hear, because we have not taught the church that they're even being discipled when they go into church. So there has to be communication on the part of the teachers to say, I have a responsibility to rightly divide the word of truth, but you have a responsibility to also make sure it is the word of truth and to be careful how you hear, because you are a student of the word.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up because I've been kind of ruminating as I'm listening on two things. One is I want to encourage those who don't think that they would be good in apologetics. They may not. It isn't for everybody. Although you need to have a good answer. You may be gifted and called to a different area of ministry and service, and we love it that you do that. However, you need to have an answer. That's number one. Number two, hearing, you're right. Not just hearing when the word is taught, you have to pay attention to what somebody is telling you. When I go, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I go to weird functions. I go to the Parliament of the World's Religions. I go to Paganicon. I'll be going to Paganicon 2024, there are going to be 1,000 witches, Wiccans, Druids, and so forth. And we have some people that go with us. And one of the things that I kind of I start off telling them after training them, here's what you're going to run into. Here's what they're essentially going to believe. You have to understand that none of the two of them have exactly the same belief. So you need to listen to what they say and ask them a question. What do you believe and why do you believe it? Start there. Don't start with an apologetic, because you may not be talking to the issue that brought them in to begin with, but you have to hear what they're saying.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to show people your article. This is what it looks like. Go read it. We have the link in our show notes. What Babylon teaches teaches the church about discipleship. Babylon is discipling you right now. That is the world. Right. Babylon was intentional, immersive. It was not neutral. And our discipleship should be the same, only in the opposite direction. So I would encourage everybody to get a hold of that article.
Well, we really appreciate you being with us, putting up with our shtick, and making allowances for the little bit of a glitch that we had in the beginning. Haven't really had that happen before, but it does happen. Ron, would you care to waltz us out of here?
You want a waltz? You want 3/4?
I want a waltz. Why not?
Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader. Are you hearing the sound on this?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't check to make sure I was doing it right. Okay, let's do that again.
Take it from the top.
Take it from the top. Here, hold on a second here. That means I've got to start all over again, Don.
Today's glitch day. I think it's officially glitch day.
Yeah. If I don't look at that button, then oops, no, that's not it. Well, why don't you guys keep talking? Give me a second here. Because my mouse isn't getting cooperation from what I'm doing. Okay.
Well, I just sent her a copy of our book on the Enneagram and Bill Gothard as well. So she's got reading material for like a day or two.
Excellent. They moved the sound button on me, so now it's right behind something that I don't have X-ray vision. So let's do it again. Give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D. Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, OD Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
I would say many have tried, few have succeeded, but no one's really even tried.
No one's really tried, and we're glad about that. So, but everyone, we will see you next week.